Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Bulletproof Dental Practice Podcast. Today is once again Peter and I talking about something that's very relevant. And it seems like everywhere we go, everybody's got their 2 cents on the state of our economy as, God willing, the COVID crisis, you know, hopefully starts to wind down with the vaccine being rolled out and all that other stuff. And the government's doing a lot of interesting things, Pete. And every time you and I jump on a call privately, whether it's me and you or me, you and my buddy Josh or whoever, we spend hours talking about our thoughts on this.
Mhm.
And Peter, you are digesting massive amounts of information at a pace and a clip that I've not seen many. And you have so much information. I thought it'd be great to distill your thoughts and my thoughts on what we see for business in general, because we're part of the economy and we want to try to give our 2 cents on what we think is happening and during these special times. And they're special times, Peter. Very special
They
times.
really are. And you're right about, as I'm listening to you talk about me and how I somehow go down these weird wormholes of knowledge and things. And I wonder if I'm the guy that with a tin hat sometimes. Not that I'm like a conspiracy theorist or something, but I definitely push against the norm of what people think sometimes. And so I dig in. And so you're right. The conversations you and I have been having personally are quite different than what we sometimes, in this podcast, we stay in the lane of dentistry, the business and marketing and dentistry. But at the end of the game, at the end of the day, it's about two things. And dentistry is about two things: making impact and helping people, and being a business and making money. So it's about dollars and cents too, right? And so I think we're in a weird predicament right now in entering into 2021, where the economy can go many directions, right? Um,
And it's booming right now, funny
and it's
enough.
booming, but
Stock market's record highs. And
right. And so
so,
but there's a dislocation to that, meaning Wall Street is crushing it. Main Street is dying. Main Street is dying.
yeah.
Okay. So there's a massive
And the
dislocation.
wealthy people through COVID, the have gotten wealthier in many ways. A lot of people that hold stocks have seen their net worth grow, and between big businesses getting large PPP checks, and then Main Street, getting a $1,200 stimulus check. And what was the last one? Just got passed. It was 600. It got fought to
600.
raise to 2,000.
Right.
But these are not meaningful things for people that are what we call the essential workers, and their kids are at home. Childcare is scarce, and you're right. Main Street's getting crushed, and big businesses are growing. So I think that was what was happening in our country for a while, and the COVID crisis kind of contracted that timeline. So many things. COVID has just sped up the natural progression of things. If they were poor dental practices that were not really being run, or poorly run dental practices, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
COVID contracted their exit or their affiliation with a DSO or what have you. So the COVID crisis did not shift anything fundamentally outside of, obviously restaurants and physical contact and things being changed, but the trends that were happening already, big businesses getting bigger and pressure on dentistry, that just contracted that whole timeline. So I just want to give a little context for Peter, because he won't say this about himself, but I have some friends that are really smart and they're really influential and they know what they're talking about. And invariably over our relationship, years and years ago, these friends would talk so much crap about Peter right to his face. I mean, like, you're going down this wormhole and come on, what are you thinking? Whether it be Bitcoin or his theories on economics. But it's cool to see one by one, all of them have to turn around and be like, hey, can you put me back in touch with Peter? I want to talk to him about, like, oh, the thing you joked about with him like 2 years ago when we were at dinner in Atlanta. Yeah. I'm like, well, you're going to have to eat some freaking crow. Like, you better apologize. So
Uh,
I want to tell you that, because you spend so much time on this, and you're like, now that we see, inflation on the horizon, and assets like Bitcoin moving north, all of a sudden you're like the local guru for all these people. I mean, geez, you
well, I don't
spoke
know. I think
about
that's nice. I think that's kind of you.
amongst my friends. I mean, I'm
Right.
not.
And honestly, and some of mine too. I have a local mastermind that, the non-dentist mastermind. I have one here, and there are people coming about face and saying like, hey, remember that? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Um, and look, it's nice to be, it's nice to be where am I going with this, Craig? I think a lot of that education came from me being scared. Meaning,
Yeah, it always does.
and I've always said that, and I say this in my, I say this to my friends, like I don't have many superpowers, but I think one thing I do have is I can connect the dots far in advance, and I can see things farther than maybe a little bit more than the normal person. I can see dots connecting, and I have been really frenetic recently because I'm watching what's happening in our economy, and in our mastermind, we're having these conversations because I think there's steps that we can take, even if you don't take steps now, it's just to become aware so that you can dig in and do your own due diligence so that you can be aligned with what's going on before, because sometimes when the masses realize it's like, holy shit, this happened, but it's too late. And what I'm talking about is, like you're saying, is like I give this analogy of a melting ice cube right now. So we have printed from the dawn of time to 10 months ago, right? The total money supply, we have increased that by 35% in the last 10 months, right? So we've increased our M1, which is our money supply. Our M1 is called our money supply by 35%.
That's in the United States.
In the United States, yes.
And by the way, everybody's doing it. The yen,
we're the least. We're the least
offenders. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah.
So inflation is set at, cost of index is set at 2%, right? And that's what's reported. It's a CPI index, it's the consumer price index. And what we're learning is that this is massively accelerating. And it's accelerating to the point where I think it's going to become 10 to 15%. And why this is scary is because typically the US dollar has been the cash reserve.
Okay? For the world,
which is why we have been able to print money without consequence. And we've been able to do that in COVID and without consequence. We've actually been in a deflationary environment for a little bit of that environment. But this money has been distributed and it's been sitting stagnant.
Can you just unpack that with deflationary environment? I want everybody to understand that.
Deflationary environment means that it's basically the opposite of inflation, right? So it's deflationary, meaning it's like there's no consequence to the economic environment. You're not diluting the dollars you're holding. So right now it's saying it was deflationary for a second. The dollar got stronger in this, believe it or not, because everyone else was getting weaker. But now there's so much of it going on, right? The stimulus money, in some groups we call it the helicopter money. Money has been raining from the skies, the PPP, and at some point it's going to have to be paid for. So there are conspiracy theories that are going on. I don't know a conspiracy, Craig, anymore, but that we are just there was an interview that was done, and literally the interview was done by the head of the Treasury that said, I forget his name, and he said, "There's no limit to what we can do, no limit." And it's scary because if the savings, these hardworking Americans that have the whole thing has been to save dollars, right? Save for retirement, and if that is the vehicle in which you can save, and all of a sudden you have this ice cube that now starts to melt because you can't outpace the inflation that's happening. That's going to happen when this velocity of money starts. It gets scary. And so we've been having this discussion as it relates to dentistry in our mastermind of like, well, as costs go up, is the people who are in a PPO situation going to get squeezed out, right? From an insurance standpoint, is it going to be are the margins going to be reduced even that much more? Because you have this dislocation of environments, right? The CPI.
Well, it's also the PPOs won't respond as fast as the inflation moves. So, for those who, need the explanation, inflation relates to the buying power of the dollar. So when there's hyperinflation in other countries, which we've seen, places like Argentina and other countries that have, or Greece, you'll basically be buying a latte at Starbucks for $15, before too long. And what would wind up happening is, will the PPOs respond quick enough to say that crown, instead of being $700, has to go to $1,200 or $1,300? And in that time period, would it put so much pressure on the individual practice to stay afloat? These are just interesting things to think about.
Right, which is actually put you in a situation. So I'm going to pull this all back. And if that is my thesis, right, if that is my hypothesis of what is going to happen, then it would behoove me to lever up with debt.
As a hedge.
Now I'm pretty levered up. I have lots of real estate and lots of things, but like, honestly, it's gotten me thinking, because if I can borrow a strong dollar today and pay it back with potentially a much weaker dollar 10, 20 years from now, wouldn't that be an arbitrage?
Yeah.
It's
So
scary, right?
I just want to unpack that as well. So when you are buying that $15 latte or the $20 latte, your mortgage payment on your house or your building or whatever else is the same 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Your payment is fixed.
Mhm.
So when inflation tends to happen, hard assets, whether that's real estate, gold, silver, Bitcoin, those things are hedged against inflation because they have some real tangible value. And by the way, we've beat this up pretty good. And Peter and I are always talking about it with the mastermind. Most of the mastermind that we have, we were talking about getting in. Most actually went in
Mhm.
about 50% ago, right,
Well, I
Pete?
had an out. I am very timid to talk about it these days, just because, like you alluded to, I've been beat up, and so I feel like sometimes people look at me with a third eye. Because it was a smaller focus group, I had 8 people that said, "Can you do an hour and teach us?" kind of thing, and so I did. And the people at the time, I guess, Craig, right about this time, it was right around 15,000, maybe.
Yeah, it was a little under 15,000, but
Yeah, and
most people of the mastermind actually bought in. So now we're on group text
bought in
and
big, bought in pretty
yeah.
pretty considerably, and so obviously so where are you going with that? I'm sorry.
Well, it's just as inflation happens, it's hard assets, silver, gold, because you're saving the ice cube that's melting. So if you're stockpiling cash and you feel really good about your balances in your bank account, you can get that cash eroded by inflation. And it's an important thing because Peter and I don't pretend to be economists, by any stretch of the imagination, but what is happening right now is unprecedented. People like Scott Galloway said in our last podcast, the pandemic is not unprecedented. There have been pandemics before. They happen unfortunately, every a couple decades, and even ones that have more loss of life. What is unprecedented is the valuation of our markets and
Mhm.
the way it's been fueled by printing of money or quantitative easing. How they've actually tried. Our government's addicted to I'm sorry, our economy's addicted to stimulus, and without stimulus, it's you wonder what would happen. And there's a point where all this PPP money needs to be paid back, and social services that the new government's going to be putting in. It becomes scary, and it's not it's scary if you choose to ignore it. And I think the purpose of what we're talking about here is just to start thinking differently. People will say to me, I used to say to Peter all the time, like, okay, so if I jump into Bitcoin as an example, or if I jump into a hard asset like silver, gold, real estate, something like that, I would often say to Peter, when do I get out of Bitcoin? When should I sell it? And he's like, well, that's the whole point. It was like that moment in the Matrix when, remember, the kids trying to bend the spoon. There is no spoon. I was like
Mhm.
this inflection point. I'm like, oh shit, I see what he's saying.
Neo,
He's
you get
saying,
it.
Peter's saying that no, I'm not. Why would you go into dollars? So it's not you're jumping on like some new stock that's going to run and they're going to trade it out. You're gonna think eventually there's going to be some form of consensus that um, Bitcoin is worth something on a global scale. If it reaches a consensus of gold is 10 trillion. That means each Bitcoin would be $500,000. So it's just an interesting idea. And for those that
That's
have a lot of,
only if it gobbles up that asset class,
yeah, if it
right?
did,
And
if it did.
there's 100 trillion in non-performing bonds, right?
Yeah, and this is the
Okay.
type of stuff that we talk about all the time, privately. And I'm like, we should at least allow. There's going to be some people that are receptive to this, and think about what and some people may say like, oh wow, I guess maybe I missed it. But I have a funny story about well, first of all, I have two funny stories. I have a story about Align stock, Invisalign. I told everybody to buy it at $30 a share. I watched it go to like 100, and I was like, damn it, I missed it. And now it's like 500 and something. And I had the same thing with Amazon. I was an early adopter when Amazon first came on the scene. I think I bought it like 150 bucks a share, and I sold it at 300 because everybody says, what do they say? Pigs get,
Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
yeah. So I was like, I double my money. Let me move on. Let me pivot. And then I watched it go from 300 to 900. I'm like, damn, 900 to
Mhm.
1,000. Damn, 1,000 to 1,200. Damn. And I'm like, you know what? Everybody and their grandmother has a Prime membership. I'm gonna actually pony up and invest in Amazon. I bought it at 1,500. It was raging, and now it's at 3,000. So
There you go.
Peter, and I don't want to make this all about Bitcoin because it's not.
But
But
that's a network effect too, and let me tell you
yeah.
why. So there's a
So
massive
explain
thing.
the network effect, Facebook, all that. That's
So
important
the
to unpack
value
that.
of the network is is a square value.
Basically, let me take the science out of it.
Thank you.
The network size predicates the value of anything.
Yes.
So Facebook does not have value intrinsically until it's spreading. So the more people that are on Facebook, the more valuable it got. So it's the same thing with access points. Like for example, many people across the globe have an iPhone. Many people do, and some people in China do, but not everybody has the ability to buy Apple stock. You can't buy you can't. We live in America.
US, right? You have to
Yeah,
be
it's
American.
a U.S. stock, and many countries don't allow you to invest in U.S. companies like that. So the interesting thing about like gold or Bitcoin, for example, is the network effect. Everybody has access to gold. Everybody in the world has access to Bitcoin, actually much more greater access to Bitcoin than gold. Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he had a epiphany when he was stationed in Vietnam. And Nixon had just taken the US dollar off the gold standard in 1971. So now dollars had no relation to any hard asset. And Kiyosaki had the foresight to say gold's going to boom. And the funny thing is he would be able to go over in Vietnam and speak to these, Vietnamese people. And it was an incredible story how there was no bargain to be found. Gold is gold, no matter where you go. Everybody has consensus. I mean, for God's sakes, 2,000 years ago, that gold had value. I mean, there's conquistadors were coming here in the 1400s with gold.
It's pre-Christ money, right?
It's yeah. So and all it is because a bunch of people were fascinated by the shine and shimmer of it. So, but other than its shiny, shimmering surface, it could have been copper. It could have been anything.
I think this is going to be not just Bitcoin, Greg, but I'm talking about. I think we are in the throes right now of the biggest wealth transfer in all of human history.
Well, it started pre-COVID.
It started pre-COVID, and what I mean
and I would even go further to say that all the unrest we have. Whether it's racial tension or whatever tension you want to talk about that's existing in the US right now is really under the guise of class warfare. I really do believe that, because I think that there's slogans being chanted by the ringleaders of the different voices that are feeling disenfranchised. It's, no justice or what have you. There's massive injustices going on, but what the underlying cause is, I think, a class injustice, and as Scott Galloway said, there's a functioning guillotine located outside of Jeff Bezos's apartment in New York. There's people outside protesting him right now. There's people spray painting on Nancy Pelosi's door like, we want our money.
The scary part about this too is that, like you said, from a COVID situation, is that this created an environment now where people are going to be set up and they're wanting money on a continuum, right? Maybe not a UBI situation, but
what's a UBI? Sorry,
universal basic income. It's what Andrew Yang ran on, and he's
which actually made a lot of sense, by the way.
But unfortunately,
we've done it.
How is that sustainable, right? That gets us into a part where the socialism situation where, socialism is a great idea until you run out of other people's money, and eventually you're going to run out of other people's money. So UBI isn't a good idea, Craig. But I hear you. But when have you ever seen a government program rolled out and then repealed? Meaning,
it always gets better.
Social Security. So that is
the Constitution was like 5 pages long. The last stimulus was like 50,000.
Yeah, and that's 6 hours to read it. 6 hours to read it and vote on it. By the way. That was the timeline, but okay. So all this stuff, I know we're kind of rambling over the place, but I would encourage people.
I think it's important to ramble and talk about everything that's coming at us, and then let's go to a point where we can pivot. What can you do? So
I would let me put a pin in that for just a second. I would encourage you to look at something instead of looking at what's published from a CPI standpoint. I would encourage everyone to look at something called a Chapwood Index right now. And a Chapwood Index takes in part the geographic location, what is the true cost of inflation going on, because inflation really was nothing meant more to be than a form of taxation. Okay, right? Inflation was designed to encourage people to spend rather than save. So that meaning that if it was set at 2%, then next year it would be less worth. If you got $100, it would be next year it'd be worth $98. So it was encouraged to get you to spend and get the economy moving. That was the velocity of money. Velocity of money means the amount of times it changes hands in a certain time cycle, right? Velocity, how fast that money is moving. It's a hot potato scenario. But if it all of a sudden goes to 10 to 15%, like some of these areas in the Chapwood index are indicating, then now that potato got much hotter, which means the velocity gets increased all the more, which now means we are in a scenario of hyperinflation, which is why we're going back to the hedge of, if that is the thesis, wouldn't it make sense for me to hedge and say, cool, I'm gonna buy this building, put down 20%. I'm gonna buy Bitcoin, the only anti-inflationary asset that I know of right now, because gold is not really an anti-inflationary. Gold is pretty good at staying consistent, right? Meaning if I just don't want to lose money, gold and silver are really good.
Well, gold actually can be fracked. There's meteors rolling around our near Earth orbit.
Dude, they're finding supplies all the time, and it's all predicated on something called stock to flow. And the value of something is based on its scarcity. And if you find these big,
if gold's price is precious enough, they will figure out a way, just like oil.
There it is.
Make more of it.
Yeah. There, you nailed it. Yeah. There, you nailed it. If the price goes high enough, it's not going to go to $10,000. You know why? It's because if it goes to 5,000, everyone gets super motivated to go find more, which then they find a mass of a gazillion ounces somewhere.
Right.
And now
shoot a rocket up. Have Elon, shoot a rocket up, lasso a meteor that's 15 megatons of gold and bring it down.
But hold, so now you've created something that was scarce, and now you've diluted the supply, which then lowers the cost. Right. This is based. Yeah, ironically, Craig, you know what's funny? I actually got a C in economics at a community college because I needed it for a summer course, and I got a C in this because I wasn't interested at all. I was like, this doesn't affect me. I'm going to be a dentist.
But you understand your physics, though. This is physics. This is like you pour the water in the glass.
And I understand human psychology.
Yeah.
Right. I understand psychology just from, even from I take a hard right by studying it for trying to enroll cases as a dentist. Right. So humans are like, I love one of your famous lines you ever said is humans are messy. I think that was you. I think you say that.
I part it from somewhere else.
And it's just so true. Like humans are we make decisions based on fear and then loss, right? So it's just funny to watch.
Running towards something or running away from something. It's either pain of avoidance or pain of attraction.
No, or as dentists, we spend all of our lives trying to aggregate, and then the rest of our lives trying not to lose what we've aggregated.
Yeah.
Right. And so you and I are in this stage of our life where we have worked hard 20 years. And so we're at the point where we have accumulated stuff. Yeah. And so this is more relevant at our stage of life, is saying, gosh, now how do I avoid just being eviscerated by a sovereign government doing something that I have no control over? So yes, this is where I start getting...
Let me get back to one thing for a second. So one of our mastermind clients, who will be nameless.
Clients.
I'm sorry?
Clients.
I don't know why I said that.
That seems weird.
Okay, one of our mastermind people.
Friends.
Okay, fine. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I hate when people, by the way, call my patients my clients. It just used to irk me. It's a client of your practice. Anyway, so it's funny I use that word. Anyway, one of our attendees of the mastermind, I'm going through some of the stuff with him, and he's in a freestanding shopping center, and there's 5 bays in the shopping center, and he's got 3 of them. Right. The other 2 are vacant. Landlord made him a super sweet deal to take over the other 1. Like basically I'll give you a blank and tenant improvements and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so, John, how much is your, I'm using John fictitiously. How much is your rent going to be? $12,000 a month. What do you think the building's worth, John? I don't know, 1.5 ish, I bet. I'm like, well, he's like, the landlord's giving me a sweet deal. I'm like, do you realize why he's giving you a sweet deal? And I told him, I said, listen, when he signs you up on his lease, you are literally paying his mortgage. You are literally paying his mortgage, and he's making money on you. So not only are you paying down his asset, he's got profit and cash flow on you, and he's depreciating the building, and the building's appreciating in value. It's the quadruple win. And my buddy Michael is a really big real estate guy. And know what Michael said?
And one other point, by signing up that lease, I don't want to get you down the real estate rabbit hole either, but by signing up a long-term lease, the value of the building goes up tremendously.
So he can refinance it, pull out his original capital, and still maintain 30% equity in the building. But the funny thing was, I told Michael, I said, Michael, I'm talking to John in my mastermind. He's like, dude, what are you doing? I was like, what are you doing? What do you mean? He's like, don't tell them that. He was kind of half joking, but he wasn't. He's like, that's my business. That's what I built my business on.
But Craig, it's not always I hear what you're saying, and it seems blatantly clear to you, but it's not always it's not always the path. And ownership of something like that is not always the path at all times.
Right. But if you're going to pay more to rent it than own an appreciating asset, everybody says if it like floats or flies, you rent it.
But floats, flies, or beeps.
Yeah. Well, I haven't heard that one yet. That's brand new to me.
That was my grandfather said that.
Yeah, really? I'd love to have met him. Anyway, so if it floats or flies, you rent it, you don't buy it, because as you know, boats and planes are just constantly, I mean, not that we all know all the stuff, but I belong to a boat club. It's the best thing ever. I go to the boat. It's in Florida. It doesn't cost me more than like maybe $50 an hour or $75 an hour. And if I go there and the boat, like the stereo doesn't work, I'm like, hey, Alex, can I get a different one? He's like, yeah, no problem. Here's the other one. Boats are just tremendous, like, cash eaters. So, but that same saying of the depreciating asset of the flies or floats, where it doesn't get better over time, everything that appreciates or gets better, that is something, if you're going to spend more to rent it than own it, you're shooting yourself in the foot, in my opinion. Peter and I have done some of the smartest moves we've ever done was to tie up real estate that we were involved with.
It's a levered bet, like going back to the full circle what we're talking about. Even before it was, I've always been a fan of real estate. Even before this, like I say, this hypothesis that I have about the CPI or inflation, because what other scenario can you potentially just give someone saying, hey, I'd like to get this asset. Okay. To get that asset, you only have to give 20% of the money to get that asset, but you can realize the full effect minus the debt service.
And the way the tax laws are written.
And the way I can take 100% of that deduction. Right. So
what sucks, by the way, is the dentists, the lawyers, the upper middle class, we pay the taxes. Everybody can be mad as hell at Donald Trump, but all Donald Trump is doing is he's in the real estate business. Mm-hmm. And my buddies are the same thing. They do 1031 exchanges. They buy a property, they sell it eventually when an opportunity comes along, and they have 6 months under our tax code, a 1031 exchange, to park that asset into another one and not have to pay the taxes on it. So every dollar you make as a dentist, you're going to get taxed. So that efficiency alone of the way real estate works is the greatest secret of all time of the wealthy. Wealthy people do not pay tax. They don't, because they have the capital to enter tax efficient investments.
No, that's probably going to change with this administration.
Well, who knows? Who knows? But I mean, and by the way, when you said real estate, I want to clarify. Real estate, I think it's important.
Owner occupied real estate, you're saying?
Well, even another 30,000 foot view of that as well. Another layer above that, commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. Income producing real estate. Don't think of your house as a great investment. For a while, I was trying to put more principal into my house. Mm-hmm. I was doing it like as recently as 3 and 4 years ago. But I have a lot of really wealthy friends around me, and they all don't. I mean, obviously they're not massively leveraged on their houses, but at a certain point they don't want to pay all their house off.
You should not, right? And
because the problem is when you try to get your money back out of your house, it's really inefficient. They charge you massive closing costs.
So I love that you use that term, efficient, because I'm gonna do a podcast kind of YouTube lesson eventually. I tried the other day, but it didn't work, but basically on the efficiency of certain debts and how to calculate that, right? And so
your cash flow index.
Yeah. And what's called an ERR, which is an effective rate of return, which is the cost that the bank is making on lending you that money, meaning what they're really making. And so you can find debts that are super efficient. And typically, Craig, a 30-year amortized mortgage at low rates like we have now are super efficient, because you can make the minimum payment. You can expect inflation to tick up a little bit, and then you're only required to pay back with a dollar denominated value that you signed up for.
I know, which is the most beautiful thing. So just to boil that down, a lot of dentists that are listening to this, you guys might be the first person in your family that's actually completing college, or maybe the first doctor, or maybe you might be the son or daughter of an immigrant, and you're the first person that's going to actually make a good living. And there's rules of the poor and there's rules of the wealthy. And I think the mantra that gets sold to us is debt is bad, because people hear debt and they categorize it: credit card debt, mortgage payments,
which is bad.
By the way, there is good and bad debt. I know
consumer debt is horrible.
consumer debt is horrible, but you have there are certain you can't be debt averse. Well, yeah, listen, I can't tell you what you should do, but when I first was became friends with Pete had absolutely no debt on anything. I'm like, Pete, what are you doing? And it was just it's something you
That's
actually
not
had to
true.
break.
That's not true. I had
Well,
no
you had
debt.
very little. You had very little.
I had lots of debt on assets. I had no debt on the practice. Correct. So, but I had lots of business. I had lots of
Well, I
building
mean,
debt.
like even things like building practices,
That's true. I
furnish.
did like to cash flow that, right?
Yeah,
Which I don't regret.
no, there's no regrets, but you can't just say that that's the way I like to roll because interest rates are 7% and 8%, and then they're 2% or 1.8%. It's got to change your dialogue. And
Well,
if
you
you
don't
have,
want to get, I'm talking about leverage and, with leverage, you can move the world and all that stuff. But, right. But there's a scenario Craig and I, you have friends and I who have become bankrupt because they've
yep,
gotten over levered. Right. So
yep,
there is a fine balance where you say, if X happens, will I be okay? If Y happens, what will happen? So what I do now is I look for asymmetric opportunities, right? Maximum upside, minimal downside. Can I cover the downside that happens? Yes. Can I, what's going to happen in a great scenario? It could 10X. So like when we had Pomp on, I encourage everyone, if they didn't listen to the Pomp podcast, like I know some people still to this day, God dang, I don't know why, hear the word Bitcoin and they tune out. I don't want to hear that shit. It's
oh, my
right.
own family. I was
Yeah.
sending them, but I sent them all sorts of stuff.
But
My
take the
sister's like,
word
"Why are you
Bitcoin out of
sending?"
his podcast. Take the word Bitcoin out of his podcast and just take that word out and insert anything else. But like, listen to him talk, right? Um, anyway, so I know we're all over the place. I guess the genesis, Craig and I have a content list of things that we want to discuss at some point in the podcast, and nothing, when we had this long list, and nothing was really resonating today because we have to kind of feel inspired to talk about it. But given that it's the first of the year, given that this is something that in the mastermind we're talking about, he and I personally are talking about, we're talking about other groups of friends, some of my friends that are very well-to-do and smart and influential in my town are talking about. So it was kind of incumbent upon us, right? I think the first thing, the most value that we can bring to the Bulletproof audience is just awareness. And it's not saying like do what we say, it's not saying track that, but if anything, if you became interested by anything that was said, dig in, do some research. There's no excuse for not being able to learn something in today's day and age. Dig into that Chapwood index. Even if you think I'm full of shit, dig into Bitcoin, see if I'm full of shit. Dig into anti-inflationary, dig into M1 money supply. Look at all the printing that's going on. Just dig in and draw your own conclusions about something. But doing nothing,
Yeah, you owe it to yourself to understand.
and then you can decide to do nothing, right?
Right.
But by doing nothing and ignoring what's saying, like you don't want to have regret and saying like, yeah, those guys talked about it or someone talked about it. Keep an open mind. Always be learning about something because it's not all about just dentistry. It's not all about whatever. There's bigger macro environments at play here that I think relate to the day-to-day that we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And also have someone that's on your team to advise you. Have a group of advisors that are not looking to take advantage of you by selling you a bunch of highly commissioned products. But get a good team and get a good accountant and use the tax code to your advantage as best as it allows you to. I think that's important as well.
It's funny. I do a lot of my learning, Craig. My wife makes fun of me, but I get stimulated a lot by Twitter. I'm not a big contributor of Twitter. I'm a huge consumer of Twitter because I follow really smart people. And I think Twitter is a great place where you can follow, instead of Instagram, where you're having to follow their stupid vacations. They're just like, they're living their best life, dumb. And it makes you feel horrible, right?
Yeah.
Twitter is great. And that people are really forced to write something intelligent because they can't flex their rented Ferrari or their,
But it's also a limited amount of characters.
Limited amount of characters. So it's very it's like my love language. It's super pithy and it's talking about stuff that's intellectual and everyone almost wants to outdo the post by being smart, witty, creative and whatever. But in that, you follow all these smart people and then you can see what their kind of their brain flow is thinking about at the time. And some of these people are 10x smarter than me. 100x smarter, right? But you get to see, and then I get to like, what is this? What is this Chapwood index? Or what is money supply? Or what is, whatever it is? What is this you speak of kind of thing? And then I dig in. and then I dig, and then I educate, and it's really cool. Like I told Pomp on the podcast, regardless of whatever happens to Bitcoin or cryptos or whatever, it's been one of the joys of my educational life, because it has made me open my eyes to bigger macro environments, geopolitical, how the world works, how money supply works, how all the things work, as opposed to me. I was living for so long in my bubble of, how do I get new patients, right? And it made me it made me look bigger than that. And it's just fascinating. I was so myopic, Craig, for so much of my life, and I think that's part of it. You're literally building the donut. If you remember the Dunkin' Donuts commercial, "Time to make the donuts," like that's you, right? I was the one building the TVs and running the cat wires and doing the marketing and doing the dentistry. And you're making the donuts, you're putting the donuts on display, you're selling the donuts, you're cleaning up the donuts, all the shit, and you just forget at some point, like it's not always about that. It's not just, you got to get outside and zoom out. But I always tell my friends, like, just zoom out a little bit.
Well, that's the other thing. We're both very lucky, incredibly lucky to have the friends that we have. We have a great group of friends, and I started working out again. I took a long time off after COVID, because I just can't do weights at my house. It just doesn't inspire me. I don't have the equipment and stuff like that. So I have this awesome trainer, and I'm looking for someone to work out with me. So I grabbed this guy, my buddy Tom. So Tom is like CrossFitter, he runs loops around me, but I know he's willing to work out, 3-4 days a week with me at the time I want to work out, and he's going to push me to be in better shape. So you're a product of the people you surround yourself with. If you are that, young gal that's just graduating dental school, and you're a bunch of your friends are not doing what, not playing life at the level you want to play at, you got to be discriminatory. We always say that. I always say that on the podcast. It's not being, you're not going to be mean to say goodbye to these friends. You're not saying goodbye, but you're just going to be have a little bit more discretion with your time. So you
try to be the poorest, dumbest person in your group, and the least fit in your group,
and the least fit
of the people you hang out with.
Right. Yeah. So if you are heavy and you want to lose weight, find some fit friends. They have routines and behaviors that you can learn from. If you want to, if you're the wealthiest of your friends, and
you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, you're in the wrong room. Or if you're in a room with fit, wealthy people that are miserable, then you're in the wrong room as well.
Find some happy friends.
So you got to find the happy ones as well. So it's neat, but that's what shifted for Peter and I. It's like you're being in a room and listening to people and like, oh my God, I'm the biggest idiot here. I don't even know what they're talking about. And then just get proximity around those people. I mean, I've heard great stories from Tony, where Tony was talking about running around doing seminars all the time, and he couldn't, and then he got this invitation to go somewhere, and they're like, he's like, I don't know if I could make it. I'm going to be on stage here in Sacramento. I'd love to go with you guys, a group of billionaires. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Just jump on a plane. He's like, yeah, but I got to connect through Sacramento. And he did all these things. And Tony at the time was making a lot of money, so his time was valuable enough to at least charter a private plane. But he wasn't thinking that way. And he wound up missing everything and missing the whole thing, and like having to sleep in like some hotel room in like Detroit on a connection, and missed the whole thing. So he shafted all of his time and shafted everything. But it was just like this aha moment for him of like, okay, well, I could do this too. And everybody thinks, oh yeah, well, private planes, that's a millions of dollars to buy one. Yeah, it is. But if you want to fly once a year on it, it's a couple thousands of dollars or whatever.
Is that the story he tells at Business Mastery? And I remember it.
He tells a variety of stories like that, but the context of the story is that he was lucky enough to learn from really, really talented people. And Tony
stood on the shoulders of giants.
He did. And people, he was that guy thinking like, I don't feel like I deserve to be here. A lot of times he talks about that. Like he would have been in a plane with a bunch of billionaires, like, I don't deserve to be here. And he had to like break through that thought. Like many of us have to break through those thoughts of what you deserve. You have to have a certain level of what you deserve. There's people that produce tons of dentistry that are not as talented as people who produce minimal amounts. And it's because they actually believe they deserve it. And you can find those people that don't believe they deserve it. They get mad at what other people are charging. So you see what Dr. Jones charges on the street is $2,000 a crown. I'm like, well, shit, there's guys in New York charge $4,000 a crown. You deserve it. You deserve that. And, Famous story from Picasso. Remember that story where he's
Did you
painting
see
on the
that?
Seine?
Did you wait? Did you see that story I posted last night on our our network? So we have a network that we're about to launch, and the mastermind is kind of beta test. So it's like a closed Facebook group, but essentially a network. And so I was talking about the story I had with my trainer. And this is, I don't have many stories, Craig, so bear with me. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to hear a story from you.
Okay. So I had a trainer, going back to the trainer thing, and I really liked him. His name was Mike, but everyone called him Coach because he was full into his coaching, and he was the best. He was the best one. Before I signed up with him, I would watch all the trainers at Lifetime, and he was head and tails superior. So I was like, I want you. He's like, awesome. So we started training together, and because I was kind of, he's younger. And so I was his business mentor a little bit because he was, interested in the fact that I had real estate and I'd done all these entrepreneurial things and blah, 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 blah. Right. So he would spend time getting my body ready, and I would, in between sets, I would just talk to him about stuff. And so I kind of trained him along the way, and he said, dude, and he came to me one session, and he was all excited. I'll never forget it. He was all excited. He was bouncing up and down talking to me. He's like, Doc, you're never, I am 100% sold out. I can't offer a training session for 3 months. I am booked to the max because of all the things you've taught me. And I stopped and I was like, I did a shitty job. And he said, what? I was like, I failed you, buddy. I'm sorry. If that's what you drew was a success, I failed you. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, because you sold out your time. You sold out your time. You didn't sell out. So literally not only did you create a non-scarce environment, you created an environment where people couldn't provide more. So what I want you to do from here, I want you to raise your prices and keep raising your prices until you lose at least one client. He's like, what? Like, just trust me. So he came back and he did this. He's like, I raised it and no one has left. He's like, I've had a couple of people grumble, but no one has left yet. I said, we'll keep raising it.
That's awesome.
Okay. And so here's where it gets interesting. And this is where human psychology plays into it. He went from charging $65 an hour by the time we were done to charging $125. He had a 20% attrition rate, but now he has scarcity in his inventory. When he takes the new Mrs. Jones, the Buckhead Betty, we call him, on a tour, he said, look,
Buckhead Betty.
That's what right? When he takes her on a tour of the gym, he can say,
have the West Highlands Hillary too?
No, it's not just Buckhead Betty's. Okay. He can say, look, Betty, I'm glad you like the gym. I know you want to work with me, but here's the deal. I only have one slot. And I know it's $125 an hour. It's twice what these other guys charge and gals charge. But there's a reason for that. It's yours if you want it. If you don't, no problem. I've got another tour in an hour. And he's like, without fail. He's like, it happens every time. I was like, it's human psychology. It's a scarcity thing. So I don't know how I went on this tangent, I mean, listen, but we're talking about it, right? Because I know what I was thinking, because you say that dentists have this, we always have this. I am booked out of my office for 3 months.
Yeah,
right?
Taking $700 PPO fees and crowns.
I'm booked out, and it makes us feel good. And I have been guilty of wearing that badge of honor that says, "Look at me."
Well, no, you can wear the badge of honor because you are fee for service.
Don't be so scared, especially wrapping this all in. Don't be so scared to potentially outrun this. If you're looking at the things we're talking about, potentially, if we do have this run on inflation, don't be afraid to raise your fees. Yes, you might have some attrition, but remember, if you can raise your fees 10%, I'm not advocating that everyone does that. Again, it differs where you live, what time, where you are in your life cycle, all these things. But raising your fees 10% usually results in a 30% increase in profitability.
Oh yeah, with a fixed overhead, it does. You can show the math how that works. If you're fixed overhead and you raise a fee, it winds up hitting your bottom line at an exponential amount. But by the way, those people that will tell you, like if you raise your fee, if you charge $1,000 for the crown, like that's ridiculous. You could actually have rewound that conversation in time and say, Mrs. Jones, crowns are $275. And she would have said, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
$275 for a crown? Like you would have gotten that with whatever number you made. So it's an interesting thing. And also, listen, if you're taking your time, you're listening to a podcast like this, you're educating yourself, you're working on your business systems, who says there's a fair market for you? I mean, you're the best at being you and your specific style of dentistry. When I do an Invisalign case, I'm competitive, but I don't want to be the cheapest in the area. I've learned so
Mm-hmm.
much over the 20 years of doing Invisalign. I'm faculty for Invisalign for a reason. Like I want to, flex my specialty.
You want to almost create some scarcity with what you do, right?
Well, it's infinitely scalable. I could do as many
Everyone
as,
can't be your customer. Everyone can't have Dr. Spodak.
yeah.
And that's the thing what I'm getting at. I know we're kind of all over the place. Let's I feel like we're talking and ranting all over the place, and maybe it's appropriate
It's appropriate
for
it's
where we are in
2020.
this
It's
life and
2020.
everyone's brains
Yeah.
right now, right? We
Yeah,
had a
exactly.
clean slate. We're in 2021, and hopefully it starts looking less like a dumpster fire in a meth lab than it did last year. From a year I say meth lab. I always talk to Canadian friends. I was like, does it feel like you're living on top of a meth lab? Like,
I've never been around a meth lab, so I'm
well,
not sure.
you
But
never
I've
watched
seen a
Breaking. You
dumpster
never watched
fire. They're
Breaking
hard to
Bad.
put out.
Never watched Breaking Bad. It's just
No, you know me. I never watched anything.
oh god.
But I think that the takeaways that are important are just look at alternative assets. Don't be afraid to pony up and invest in yourself.
Always. That's a foregone conclusion. I'm glad that was not glossed over just now, because that is always a good thing. And the beautiful thing is, Craig, that's usually the cheapest investment you can make. Meaning, you can educate. You know, you talk about me being this guru in certain circles. I got that education for free, by the way. It just took time and effort,
Yeah.
right?
But you can save yourself a lot of time and effort and money if you pay someone as well.
Well, that's true. Find a coach, find a mentor, find someone who knows a lot more than you do, and open yourself up to the fact that you don't know anything, just like I do every day. I want to know nothing. I want to be ignorant about stuff because it shames me into learning.
I love being wrong. I love being wrong. I had one of my new doctors that just joined my practice this morning. He saw something in an x-ray. He's like, you see something there? The guy's swollen and he's in pain. I'm like, I see what you're seeing, but I don't think that's a fracture. I think that might be a pattern of the bone. Hour later, CT scan done. He was right. I'm like, yes, I was so happy. Yeah. I love, it feels so good. I love that.
You want to be the Yoda. Yeah. I mean, that's, so let me tell you, Craig, what
you tell me, Peter.
I am really excited about this year. And I'm going to talk about this in bulletproof language. So we are going to taking this to the next level. Craig and I have made an investment because we are so sick of this virtual shit and these Zoom things and these virtual conferences that we have plunked down.
Oh, Joyce, don't mention the number.
Well, we are having a summit because we have gotten, we get emails everywhere. I want to know when the next one is. And if you're on the list, you're going to be notified first, because that's what we've always promised. That's why you've given us your text and your email, and we've never sent you anything. Like, you're going to get something probably in the next few days when this comes out. So mark your calendars. We have pretty much the entire resort in Austin, Texas, the Hyatt Lost Pines.
Yeah, I want to say Los as well, but it's because it sounds so nice. Los Pines. Los Pines. No, but it's Lost Pines. It's right outside of Austin, right? Austin,
yeah. And it's only about 15 minutes from the airport.
400 acres, zip lining, horseback riding.
On the river.
So cool.
So why am I talking about this is because in the climate of COVID and everyone's saying, "Ooh, this is dangerous," we pretty much said we need your entire ballroom. So not only are we having ours in a 15,000 square foot ballroom, right, to make sure that we have enough spaces, because it will sell out again. Like the last one sold out very quickly. We had like 3 months ago and it was sold out last summit in Houston.
Yeah, sure.
And so we knew that there'd be 200 plus people at this one. But we needed the space, but we also needed to make sure that we had a COVID contingency. So we have this massive ballroom for us. And then due to the massive success, Craig, of the Bulletproof Hygiene now launching, by the way, if you're not following those gals on Bulletproof Hygiene is launched, and they're about to start doing their podcast and their book is coming out. Follow them on Instagram.
Well, their book is done, but yeah, at Bulletproof Hygiene on Instagram, Bulletproof Hygiene.
They have their own like 10,000 square foot ballroom to make sure that so we are pretty much going to run this resort. The date will be, and to do that, the date is going to be July 9th and 10th. And then we're going to have some couple of days of our mastermind after that, but we will pretty much be there. Use it as a vacation now. I know everyone is desperate for travel and vacation because everyone went on hiatus last year, just a forced hiatus of doing stuff. And I think people are desperate to have some community. There's some cool things. We are actually changing the curriculum a lot. There's something that, I've alluded to before on this bulletproof pathway, and how we as dentists seem to dentistry so complex and it's not all the time, and going through this pathway of just vision to, to building it, to marketing it, to doing the dentistry, to enrolling the dentistry, to retention, to acquisition, to, fulfillment, to then looping back in. And I want to share this, we'll share this diagram at one point, but it's going through the whole life cycle, and dentistry can be very step by step, but as long as you're getting the awareness to it, it can really help. So I have a prediction, Craig, that this will be the most impactful year for you and I to give to dentistry, full stop.
Oh, I agree with that. Because every year we've been able to do more and influence
And
more.
not that we have all the answers. And I hope that anyone new listening, we obviously fall on our swords all the time. We're not saying we have it figured out by any means, but we are obsessed with the fact that we want to provide value, because it's really cool to get these letters. It's really cool to get
the reviews on the podcast and stuff like that. It's super cool. It is. I'm for one really excited about that. There's 400 acres, trailheads, horses. It's Austin.
And like a lazy river. Isn't that like a lazy river?
I'm looking at the website as we talk, but it's going to be great. And what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to take July 4th off.
Same.
And I'm going to bring my family with me. There's a lot of kids activities. And, I've heard from some big experts that, their opinions as to the COVID thing, but hopefully we'll have a couple 100 million people vaccinated by then. And this will be hopefully in a rearview mirror.
Well, even if, and that's what I'm saying, even if it's not, let's just say we're in a scenario where like we've actually prepared for both scenarios. COVID being a rearview mirror. Oh, that sucked, and glad that's over. And like, okay, we're still in it. We have allowed for it.
Sure. With the amount of room that we have, I feel comfortable doing it.
You and I have made an investment in that. So it's really neat. It's really neat. And I think that's what's most on my mind right now is getting that launched, getting this Bulletproof Hygiene off and running, because they've already eclipsed us, by the way, in Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram they have for sure.
They've been live for about 17 seconds and they just crashed us already. So that should tell us something right there.
Well, listen, when you have, I could name a lot of dentists that have bigger practices and do more production than you and I combined, but I don't know of two hygienists that are each doing over 500 grand in production. That's rare. That's rare air there for them. And I'm excited. Hygiene needs that. Hygiene needs Brittany and Teresa. So
if you're on our list and emails and all that stuff that Lacey handles, I don't even know to tell you. I know text the numbers. If you're on these lists, you're going to get notification first, because I promise you it's going to sell it. And this is the year to invest in yourself with all the stuff we've talked about. This is the year to go next level, and hopefully we can play a part in that. So that's what I'm excited about, buddy. That's what I'm excited about. Really,
I'm excited about it too. I can't wait. It's gonna be amazing. And
what do we even title this podcast? This should be just like a rant, like a yearly rant. You and I just
really rant. Economy, COVID, in the future. Done.
Okay.
But this is, listen, we live in our own echo chambers, Pete. This could be the very first time that someone decided to tune in and like, okay, what did they mean by inflation? What do they mean by printing? What is this? What's really going to happen? And then this could be I've got a couple dollars saved up in the bank, and maybe it's time to,
deploy.
to deploy it. Because if cash is going to really get devalued and an asset won't, maybe I'm going to do it. So
it's funny, you and I have a conversation. I'm glad you bring that up. Craig and I personally are talking about, so we have a little treasury of, what we've through having bulletproof summits and stuff, and we've never spent that money. It's just accrued, and it's not, it's a small, well, it's a good sized number, right? Because you and I have never taken it, but it's been sitting there in cash for all this stuff, works we've done and all that stuff. And so you and I are having this conversation.
Well, no, Peter texted me a couple months ago and said, hey, any thoughts on moving all of it to Bitcoin? I'm like, done. Yes, do it. Let's do it. And then, of course, 150% Bitcoin later, we still haven't done it yet, but we're going to put our money where, where our mouths
but that's
are.
Because it's harder from a company treasury standpoint.
No, I know. I wasn't throwing shade. I'm just saying that even today, where Bitcoin is, and as we record this, Bitcoin slightly down at like $31,000, knowing that we're not going to be trading this asset back into something else for a long, maybe never, into perpetuity. I feel good about it. Makes a cool story. It's
a cool story. And look, you put your money where your mouth is. It'd be one thing if you're telling everyone that, meaning me, right? If I'm sitting here telling people this and my money is not where my mouth is. And so, because that's inauthentic. So I don't know. we got back on this topic again. But
And
anyway,
so it's as soon as we hang up, we'll be texting about it too. So this is the constant. There's a group chat. Also want to plug something that's a great service for you guys, freebpbook.com, free BP as in bulletproofbook.com. If every dentist on the planet took us up on that, we'd be overwhelmed and we go broke. So all you do is pay the shipping. It costs us more to print that book than the shipping. So
we've had a bunch of people
$5.99.
take advantage of it, and which you advise them to do. Don't just get one copy. We've had people get 10 copies at a time, right? Which is smart because they're giving them to their team and saying, hey, let's use this as a source of either of conversation, you know?
Yeah, it's true. And if you're going to pay, you might as well, it's better for us if you order the 2 copies because the shipping is, we can actually, help with that a little bit. So, but don't just get a copy, get many. The book only has so long to be green. There are references that will eventually fade and not be valuable. And we spent a lot of time on that book, and I want everybody to have it, and we're never going to make our money back.
And books are a cool thing to, like, I will buy books a lot of times and I will then gift them to people who I have influence on or friends who I think we need education on that, or what, not education, but something that would, so I think, you could even take something, let's say you're a 40-year-old dentist, and I'm sure there's many dentists in your community that look up to you. You may say, hey, look, I got this book for you. Like, so don't even think about downstreaming it to people that would impact as well. That's it, bud. I think that was a good rant. We need to make that an annual January 4th, just talking about, there could be so many things. But I think we went sporadically around a lot of topics. But looking forward to it. And everyone, if you got any questions, any comments, any content suggestions.
Oh, please. Every time someone suggests a topic for the podcast, it's always fantastic. We've never not done one.
No, I don't know about that's true or not.
No. Yeah. So you might be the first if you suggest we talk about something off the wall, but yes. What do you want us to talk about?
Suggestions are awesome because like Craig and I say, what do you say? What's the
we're in our echo chambers.
Yeah, we're in our echo chamber, right? So what we think is relevant and timely is not maybe to the masses. So there's no dumb question. There's no dumb topic. We can filter out what we think is a good thing to do, but we're definitely open to suggestions. If you have questions or something burning, we can act as your quasi, consultant in that industry. Maybe we'll answer the question. And because I'm sure we've been there, done that, probably got the scar to show you. And with that, I think we're over and out, pal.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we appreciate you.